Okay, can you guys hear us now?
Yes, I can.
I'll be darned. Miracles of late 19th century Wyoming-style communication.
Okay, welcome everybody. I want to give you a big welcome and a thank you for joining us. Today we're going to be talking about the survey and the subscriber preferences of Arizona Wildlife Views. Julie, I'm going to turn it over to you for about 30 seconds to kind of talk about what was the impetus for this study and why you needed this research.
Okay. We hadn't done a reader survey for at least 15 years, and we wanted to know if our readership had changed from the previous survey, and we also wanted to know what our current subscribers thought of the magazine, what they liked and didn't like, and what they wanted more of or less of, what changes they wanted to see. And we also wanted to see if we could talk with people who had lapsed their subscriptions to see if there was something that we could do with the magazine to lose fewer subscribers. And that was all going to be data for potential changes to the magazine so that we would be making data-driven decisions.
Okay, excellent. Now, to accomplish that, what Heidi and Julie did is they approached me, and I'm what's called the Human Dimensions Coordinator for the department. And basically what that means is I'm a big mix between a biologist, a statistician, and a social psychologist. And doing surveys is kind of what I do. So as they approached me and talked about their goals, it seemed like there were very specific subsets of goals. And one, they just wanted to get a ranking of how they feel. And what you're seeing on your screen is the first section of, give us a grade on what you think. The next thing that they wanted to know is, how did you hear about us? What kind of topics you're looking at? What kind of articles are you interested in seeing? What are you doing as a result of reading our magazine? And also, what kind of recommendations would you give to us to improve the magazine? And so I'm going to be jumping back and forth between this Word document and an Excel document. What I'm going to focus in right now is this give us a grade. And what you're going to see here is the result of that grade. And on each of these slides, I have segregated out the lapsed here in blue with the current subscribers.
Excuse me, Lauren, I'm not seeing any charts or anything. Am I meant to be clicking on something?
Is everybody else seeing this, or is it just...
I'm Dinah.
I am seeing the charts.
Me too.
What I'm seeing on the screen is a good bit different from the PDF that Julie sent us. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is that as it should be?
Yeah,
Okay,
these
well,
are
I
the,
thought I don't have any.
I have a copy of the PDF that's Arizona Wildlife Views Survey Instrument 2011 Reader Survey, but that's not what's on the screen. Is quite different.
Right. Sorry to interrupt you, Dinah, but David, what you're seeing on the screen right now is Lauren's data and results, and what I sent you is the survey instrument.
Okay.
Yeah, so what you're going to want to do is keep that survey instrument handy, because what you're looking at is the chart that is a result of that first section on the survey.
Okay.
So for example, we asked about the overall quality, the quality of information, and that translates here to the overall quality and the quality of information and so on and so forth. And so these are on 5-point scales, 1 being negative and 5 being the most positive and 3 being the middle. You can see that most current subscribers are very pleased with the overall quality. And as you would expect, those who have let their subscription lapse aren't as satisfied with the quality of the magazine. Now that's to be expected, but there are some that, if you look, the difference between the current and the lapsed seems relatively uniform, except for perhaps this quality. There's less of a difference between the lapsed and the current. However, when you look at articles that match your interest, there's quite a large discrepancy between the lapsed and the current. And then finally, the rest of those really kind of look relatively uniform in the difference that they take. Now, as far as how did you hear about Arizona Wildlife Views, this should be what you're looking at in hard copy, correct?
No.
For the record, we're seeing this fine in Wyoming on screen.
Okay. So you're looking at how did you find out about us? How did you hear about us? And that takes us to the next slide, where the vast majority of folks that have heard about us through our hunting and fishing license purchases. You can see that the lapsed subscribers are quite a bit higher there, meaning that those who purchase hunting and fishing licenses buy this, and they buy it quite frequently, but they also drop out of your subscription at a faster rate. A good example of that, of the reverse of that, is we found out about it through the mailing or an advertising insert. You get less folks come in through that effort. However, this difference between the red and the blue suggests that those people, even though there are fewer coming in, they're staying longer and part of your subscription base.
Wait, how do you interpret that? This is Martin speaking. That they're staying longer. You don't know how many years they're on the file by this chart.
Correct. I guess when I say staying longer, they're more prone to stay is maybe a more accurate way to put that. Now, we go back through time here, and when you take a cross-section of your subscription, I guess I'm making the interpolation of they're staying longer. But you're absolutely right. A more accurate way to describe that would be they're more prone to stay within your population. One note is with gifts, you know, you do get a little bit of there, but they don't stick to it, and they don't stay within your subscription population as well as when, for example, a friend introduces them to it, or any of the others, such as the mail advertisement. Okay, now within the magazine, I don't know what your level of involvement with the magazine, but there's generally these 6 headings or articles that appear regularly through the magazine, and then there's other articles that are interspersed. And we asked about these regular articles that appear here, and again, 5 is more positive. And so these outdoor tips and techniques, as well as the timely news about Arizona wildlife, that's what people rank more positively. And then interestingly, the Focus Wild, the activities for kids, that's not really what brings people into the magazine. That's not what they're most satisfied with. They're more satisfied with some of these other kinds of articles. The next thing that we looked at is this nightmare right here. Where we, oops, where we segregated the topics of anything wildlife that could go in as articles. And we separated it out into these main categories. And I did not separate them into categories here. But you can see where the interest lies. The natural history, the history of Arizona wildlife, wildlife habitat. That's what folks are universally interested in. However, you'll notice that there are some programs that there's very little difference between your lapsed and current, but there are others that there's a very large overlap. And the biggest one is this Arizona Heritage Fund projects. And what Arizona Heritage Fund does is it mainly addresses non-game and threatened endangered species. And folks that have lapsed tend to view those kinds of articles less positively. You see this same pattern that exists when you talk about wildlife that is not hunted or fished. That's non-game. We didn't want to use jargon though. And so you see that same pattern. Your current subscribers rank those far more positively than do those who have let their subscription lapse.
Habitat, predators, articles for young people.
And the reason, this is Julie Hammonds, the reason that's interesting, this chart is especially interesting, is because, you know, current subscribers just overall like the magazine better than lapsed subscribers. As Lauren pointed out, that's just logical. But when you find the specific topics where the difference between the current and lapsed is especially great, that points out something that you should think about. So that's why he pointed out like Arizona Heritage Fund projects, backyard urban wildlife. These are specific topics that are especially more interesting to people who stick with the magazine.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's correct.
Julie, this is Chris Madsen. I wonder if you guys have an idea of median age of your subscribers?
Yep, we'll get there.
Yeah, we have that information. We'll talk about it a little bit further into the presentation. Good question, though. Now, as far as what people are interested in, and the scale that folks saw is, I'm not involved in this activity, and I'm not even interested. Or I'm not involved, but there's some interest there. And then the blues represent different levels of participation. So these are lapsed subscribers. And our lapsed subscribers, just taking a quick for example, OHV, you know, there's almost 30% there that are not interested, not involved and not interested. But their latent demand is somewhat significant. But the big latent demand that exists here is this big gray of the, this would be wildlife photography. And that was pretty interesting within the lapsed population, within the lapsed subscribers. Now, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the current subscribers. There's even less of an interest there in OHV. There's more of a latent demand for wildlife photography. There's a pretty good participation in viewing wildlife from home. But what I'm going to try to do here for you is try to superimpose these two graphs so that you can begin to see how they're similar and how they're different. So as I was mentioning, within the current subscribers, they're much more likely to be not involved and not interested. However, with wildlife watching, the current subscribers are more likely to frequently participate they're more likely to occasionally participate, and much more likely to participate rarely. And so I understand that that chart is a little bit complex to understand. That's why I showed them to you separately. And if you'd like, we can send this file to you so you can have a little bit more time to absorb it. Now, here in Arizona, we talk about getting people into the magazine, but one of the main purposes of the magazine is a call to action, a way to get involved with wildlife conservation. And we asked, as a result of an article you read, did you visit a destination or try something new, do a conservation project? And these are the results here. And, not surprisingly, the more effort that is expended to participate, for example, volunteering on a wildlife project, was lower participation than is perhaps going to a destination or simply buying a fishing license. But again, I'm going to echo Julie's thoughts that you would expect there to be a difference between current and lapsed. However, when the difference becomes much greater, there's something to be said there, where the lapsed subscribers were not as willing to go to destinations or improve their skills or pick up a new hobby in relation to the rest of those calls to action.
And Lauren, this is Julie. Just to also point out on that call to action chart, I just wanted to share with the other magazine people especially, we're so happy we asked this question. I would advocate, if you're ever doing a reader survey, ask your readers what they've done as a result of reading your magazine. This just made us feel really good to see that people are getting out there, buying a license, attending an expo, trying new stuff, they say, because they're reading the magazine.
Right.
Yeah, that's real good justification when budget folks are talking, perhaps we don't need a magazine. When you can say, 2 out of 3 readers visited a place we talked about, and 1 out of 3 bought a license because they read it. That's a pretty good recruitment tool, and it provides a really good justification for having such a magazine. Now, we asked why folks are not staying within our within our subscription, and the blue folks are the yes, I'll subscribe. The red folks are I subscribe currently, but I intend to let it lapse. And the green there is folks who have already left your subscription population. Now, there's not a whole lot of blue because these are all obstacles. And if they intend to continue to subscribe, they're not going to be subject to these obstacles that are listed here on the left. However, a good comparison is the subscription is too expensive. Those who are currently in your population but intend to let it lapse, it isn't because of the money. There's about 4% who say money is the issue. But with your lapsed folks, 1 out of 6 folks said, yeah, it was too expensive for us. Another interesting one is there's not enough hunting and fishing articles. And this connects back to where did you purchase your subscription. A lot of those folks were buying the subscription as they bought their hunting and fishing articles. And when they read the magazine, they were expecting more hunting and fishing articles. And Arizona Wildlife Views is not delivering on that expectation. And therefore, you've got folks within your current subscribership that don't intend to renew because Arizona Wildlife Views is not guns and ammo or field and stream approach. This I guess, observation is matched within the article. The magazine doesn't match my interests, and then not having time to read it is also a pretty big reason why folks were leaving. Now, when we asked what kind of recommendations would you say to make the magazine better, and again, this is the people that currently subscribe. Red is those who subscribe but intend to let it lapse, and green is the folks that have already let it lapse. Now, there's a big difference between putting more emphasis on hunting and fishing. The folks who subscribe and the folks who don't subscribe, there's a bit of a difference there. But that, in addition to more photos and more articles, if you look at the major things that exist there, those are the main issues that people have with that magazine. Now, I'm going to come back to the survey itself. And I'm going to show you the results of this. We wanted to know, we have plans, or we have considered a couple different options to take when we look at Arizona Wildlife Views. One of those is putting it online at no cost, or putting some advertisements within there, so on and so forth. And the results of that are right here. Putting it online, you would think that would be a big benefit, but folks just didn't see that as a real value added. When it comes to advertising, you're right there in the middle between 5 and 1, which is the highest and lowest there. And that means that, folks aren't thrilled to pieces about advertising, but it's not a deal breaker. Now, a big difference is the gift subscription. Last year we attempted a campaign to increase subscriptions by giving out some gift subscriptions. And even though these data were collected before that effort, you'll see that there's really not a huge following there with a gift subscription. This kind of goes back to more common sense that if folks really want it, they'll seek it out and get it. And just because they receive it as a gift doesn't necessarily mean that they will continue on.
This is Martin speaking. You're asking the person who receives the gift whether they want to continue with it. But in many cases, close to 100% of the time, it's the donor who's making the gift, and they're renewing it. So I think you have to be very careful in the area of gift, that you're asking the person receiving the gift whether they're going to continue. They're being given a gift, and that's close to 100% that it's renewed.
Okay.
I think that's
Yeah.
Actually,
well, when you take a look at these data, we sent it to subscribers, and
right.
We asked, "Will you buy a gift subscription for somebody you know in the next year?" And that's not as ranking high as some of these other constructs. So yes, I guess what I'm driving at, yes, they may be renewed, but it's not at the volition of those who are receiving the magazine. It's at the volition of grandma who buys the subscription for their grandkids, or something in that type of a scenario. Now, somebody asked about demographics. Who was that wanted to know about the age?
Chris.
Chris? Okay, so Chris, here's your answer. Here's a histogram of the subscribership within the Arizona Wildlife Views, and the mean there is at about 62 years old. And I'm going to scroll down so you can kind of see what the spread is of that population. but when you start talking about people that are 40 years and younger, for the most part, those are folks that have kind of dropped out of the magazine world. To try to talk to folks who are 20 to 25 and talk to them about a magazine, their only experience with magazine is in their palm and on their smartphone. And so, you know, even though this tends to be a little bit older than what I suspected, it kind of makes some sense that there are folks who are in the older generation still subscribing to magazines.
This is Chris Madsen again. Two observations. First, the reason I asked that question to begin with was in relation to the reader reaction to children-oriented content in the magazine. And this bears out my strong suspicion that a large part of the reason that the readership is not particularly interested in kid content in the magazine is because they don't have any kids in the house anymore. The other thing that I would observe is that almost 20 years ago now, when I attended my first Regional Magazine Association conference in Santa Fe, we'd spent a whole afternoon talking about magazine demographics, and the analysis that we were looking at then was remarkably like this analysis, way before there was anything like PDAs or smartphones or anything like that. And the observation was made that up until well past retirement age, the number of subscriptions per household used to go up with age.
Did we just lose folks?
I'm here.
I'm here.
I'm here.
I heard 3 chimes. I don't know what that means.
Okay.
I might have
Well,
lost Chris.
Chris, it sounds like we might have lost you. I'm going to go ahead and answer your question just in case you can still hear us. Yeah, that's a very astute observation that, subscriptions go up the older you get. And this suggests that it's perhaps not a cohort moving through the population. For example, if you did this study 20 years ago, that peak probably wouldn't be over here with the age 40. It would still probably be here at the 60, and that's just speculation. However, what that suggests is it's not a cohort moving through the population who like magazines. It's more suggestive of a maturation. As people get older, they tend to pick up more magazine subscriptions. And Chris's observation is very much reflected within the demographic. Now, gender, these are percent male. So our subscription is very largely male. The current subscribers are older. They have nearly equal amount of adults in the household. However, Chris's observation is a very good one and a very accurate one, that there's less kids in the household. There's fewer kids there as compared to those who have let their subscription lapse. Now, as far as residency or tenure within the state of Arizona, these folks have been in Arizona for quite some time. The average is 38 and 36. And so there's very, very little difference between the tenure between lapsed and current subscribers. Income, this was asked on a 0 to 9 scale, increasing by $20,000 each time. And what this is saying is the income difference between lapsed and current subscribers is virtually negligible, as is their education. Now, as far as there being an age effect, what I did is I took what I consider to be young folk and old folk, and I'm not going to tell you the age that I drew that line at. That's proprietary information, unfortunately. And then I put and compared young folks and old folks, and everything that you see here that is less than 0.05 is statistically significant. And so in terms of do you plan to continue subscribing, those who are younger are more likely to renew their subscription as compared to those who are older. Now you can move through here, and again I will send this to folks who would like it, but you can kind of see how it is that folks differ on each one of these. For example, the outdoor tips and tricks, talking about the gear needed for some of these activities. As you would expect, the younger folks are more interested in those kinds of things. Now, the more interesting thing is when you start looking at when you ask them about the quality of the information and the magazine matching their interests, it's the older folks who are more likely to be more positive on those general aspects. And you know, I was hoping to get to the end to do some more dialoguing, so I'm gonna let that sit and let you guys explore that on your own to see how young and old folks differ from each other. But what I really wanted to talk to you about here is what is called a cluster analysis. And let's see here.
Lauren, can I set the stage for this briefly? This is Julie.
Certainly.
Okay, so we not only asked Lauren to crunch the data that came in as a result of the survey, but we asked him some especially tough questions about that data. And one of the questions was, do we have groups of different types of subscribers? Specifically, do we have one group that loves hunting and fishing and doesn't want to see any non-game or other content, and one group that isn't interested in hunting and fishing, just wants wildlife, natural history, those kinds of things? So two sort of diametrically opposed groups whose interests don't overlap. And then he did this very complicated and lovely cluster analysis for us, and here are the results.
Okay, that's a good setup. But as far as complicated and difficult, we just call it cluster analysis to sound smart. More than anything, what we do is we take a data cloud, and if you think about data in 3 dimensions, what this cluster analysis does is it takes a data cloud like this and it rotates it around. And we're talking in 3-dimensional space right here, but what we did was in 64-dimensional space, and that's kind of difficult to illustrate. So I'm going to stick with 3. And you rotate that around until you get a point of view that separates different clusters of people according to each one of those dimensions. And that's how you get different clusters that exist there. And the clusters that we got are represented right here. Namely, one cluster I'm calling satellite bulls, and you'll kind of understand the reasoning for the names in a little bit. The second one are non-consumptive folks. The third is our dedicated diehards. Those are the folks that are really excited about the magazine. And then the fourth is left in a huff. And then the fifth one is the group that has drifted. Now, I have color-coded these so that when you begin looking at the different variables, for example, the first grouping of questions on the survey are located right here. And when you have more green color to it, the higher it is. The more red it is, the lower it is. And so when you compare, for example, the group of satellite bulls as of matching their interests, they're far lower than are your dedicated diehards and your non-consumptive. There's also a very large discrepancy between the left in a huff group on the overall quality of the magazine versus those who are non-consumptive and the dedicated diehards. There's a large discrepancy there. You'll also note down here, I've taken a look at the percentages of what percentage of this group received their subscription through a family, so on and so forth. So theoretically, if we had a perfect data set, this column would add up to 100, but it doesn't because of rounding errors and fudging within the data. But you'll see that the satellite bulls purchased, a large percent of them purchased this as they were buying their hunting and fishing license, as did the dedicated diehards, the left in a huff, and the drifted folks. When you see red across the board, for example, right here, that's indicative of a method of sale that just simply wasn't all that effective. And so the state fair probably isn't our best venue to sell subscriptions to the magazine. Now, one thing I found interesting is we asked other, and we left a blank there so people could fill that in. Typically on surveys, when you have an other category, you generally see anywhere between 3 and 10%. When you see something larger like this, for example, the non-consumptive group, when it's 21%, that is suggestive of we didn't capture where they got their information. But luckily, we have what they wrote in, and we now know how it is that this group received their subscription. Now, as far as the reoccurring articles, folks, for the most part, did not like the children. This was Chris's observation. That was the one that ranked the lowest amongst all the groups. However, let's see, the satellite bulls were the least interested in that kind of activity. Now, you'll notice if you look at this and you cross your eyes just a little bit, you'll notice that the left in a huff and the satellite bulls, if you take them as a whole, you'll see that they're largely similar throughout. Their answers are very congruent. In fact, when I rotated this data and forced them to be only in 4 groups rather than 5, these folks tended to overlap quite a bit. And so when we're asking them about their interests, your non-consumptives are very uninterested in hunting and fishing regulations, how to hunt, where to hunt, those kind of activities. But when you start talking about non-game habitat, predators, T&E species, your non-consumptive folks get really excited about those, and they get more excited about those than any other group. And conversely, those folks who are the left in a huff and the satellite bulls are not all that interested in those types of articles. Now, when we issue that call to action of go to this place or participate in this activity, there's quite a big difference here too. For example, buying a hunting and fishing license, your drifted folks and your dedicated diehards are pretty similar there, but your non-consumptive are quite a bit lower, as are your satellite bulls. Now, you'll see that attending a game camp is red across the board, which is suggestive that either that activity is harder to participate in, or there's less of a latent demand to participate in something like that. Okay, now as far as the activities that you participate in, as you would expect, the non-consumptive folks are far more interested in watching wildlife in and around their home, and the satellite bulls and the left in a huff are far less interested in wildlife photography and trips. Again, non-consumptives are not all that interested in the activities of the big boy toys. Now, when I say that these two are very similar, the one thing that they do differ on is their intention to continue subscribing to Wildlife Views. Your dedicated diehards, they're very close to 1, and 1 is a yes. And because it's so close to 1, your dedicated diehards are giving you a resounding yes. Now, try not to get too bogged down into the numbers, but your 8 right here of your left in a huff and your drifted, those are folks who are strongly intending to leave or have already left. And then, I'm sorry, let me back up. Those who are this close to 8 are those who have already left. And these folks over here, your satellite bulls, are those who intend to leave or are considering stopping their subscription. And that's kind of reflected in the need for more emphasis on hunting and fishing. You'll see that the satellite bulls as well as left in a huff are very similar, but the difference is this group has already left your subscribership, whereas this group is considering doing that. Okay. Now, your non-consumptive, again, you get the, I want more emphasis on wildlife species that are not hunted. But when you start looking at I approve of legal hunting and fishing down here, universally across the board, there's approval for hunting. It's just whether or not you choose to hunt. And now I'm going to zoom out. Don't worry too much about the numbers. What I'm more interested in is crossing your eyes and taking a look at the colors. The reason why these left in a huff folks are called that is because if you look at this, they're folks who have left and are generally unsatisfied with the experience that they received. The drifted folks are those who have left, but they really kind of liked what they had when they were subscribing, but they just don't subscribe now. And if you look at the congruence between the drifted as well as the dedicated diehard, their answer patterns are very, very similar. So that suggests that within this drifted group or cluster, there's a very high latent demand for getting the magazine. It's not that they don't like the magazine, it's just they either forgot or they found something else to match that need or so on. But your non-consumptives, you're showing a pattern of interest in non-game and T&E species, almost the reciprocal of what your satellite bulls are interested in. And the reason why these guys are called satellite bulls is because they're generally more red. This column is more red than all the rest of the columns, suggesting that they're generally dissatisfied with the experience that they're receiving from the magazine. And that's also suggestive that down the road, as these satellite bulls receive their renewal, chances are they're going to become part of this left in a huff group, where they left the magazine because they just didn't care for the experience that they received from it. So what that leaves us with is it leaves us with Heidi and Julie having information that they have a group of dedicated diehards where when you look at the percentage of subscriptions, over half of their subscribers are the dedicated diehards. They are the folks that are going to subscribe to the magazine so long as the magazine stays relatively similar to what kind of quality that you're producing right now. However, they have the very small, minuscule task of trying to balance the needs of the non-consumptive with the needs of the satellite bulls. Now, from the data that we've looked at, the story behind this data suggests to me that if we shifted our magazine to a Field and Stream or a Guns and Ammo, or have our magazine have that sense, because all the people coming in and buying this subscription as they purchase their hunting or fishing license, we would better be able to retain those folks in our subscribership. However, in doing so, you would alienate this non-consumptive group who aren't all that interested in where to hunt, where to fish, what kind of regulations are there. And so Wildlife Views is at a bit of a crossroads right now with this information, and now they have the information to be able to make an educated decision on what direction they choose to take their magazine, and they'll be able to adjust their subscribership accordingly. And with that, I'm going to be quiet and open up the floor to any questions that you may have, because I guess I'd be more interested in the dialogue than hearing myself talk. So if there's folks from the states, from state agencies that have any questions, let's open it up and to you guys, and let's hear it.
Hi, this is Natasha. I'm wondering if you can speak to cost to conducting the survey.
You know, I don't recall what the cost was, because we had a bit of a fiasco trying to get the mail out. But Julie, do you recall how much this costs?
I'm looking it up in the reader survey. I'll have it for you in a minute, Natasha.
Okay, thanks.
If I'm recalling correctly, this was one that we did pretty cheaply. I want to say like 13 or 14,000.
Okay.
However, to caveat that price tag doesn't include the analysis and professional time, basically. That if we took that into account, it would raise the cost of this pretty substantially.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe more in the neighborhood of, I hesitate to hazard a guess, but maybe 20,000 if it was on the open market.
Mm-hmm.
If you took Phoenix and Tucson out of this, what happens to your survey?
That's a good question. I don't know who I'm talking to right now.
Don Winslow in South Carolina.
Okay. Don, that's a good question. What I'm going to do is I have segregated. Do you recall the age effect where I went through and compared old and young? Let's see. What I also did is I compared your loyal to unloyal, your long-term versus short-term folks. I compared rural to urban, so you can kind of see, for the most part, when you take out Phoenix and Tucson, you're left only with rural. And so I'm going to send this file off to you so you can explore what would happen if you were to take off Tucson and Phoenix. That's an excellent question.
To get back to Natasha's question about the cost of the survey, I'm pretty comfortable with Lauren's estimate, and I'm looking through the files that I've got. I don't have a specific, like a spreadsheet where we broke it down, and it did get sort of complicated because of the various mailings that we had to do, but I'm pretty comfortable with Lauren's estimate.
Okay. Just as a side note, this coding took forever, and Julie owes me lunch for that.
And you're all witnesses.
But if this tab and this sheet wasn't included here, you'd probably be able to save a pretty significant amount of money. Any other questions?
was your response rate, and how many times did you contact each potential responder?
Who am I talking to?
Chris.
Chris?
Madsen in Wyoming.
Okay, yeah, that's a good question, and what you're driving at when you ask that question is, how do we know that the people who responded to your survey are actually representative of the folks who are in your subscription base? And we do a couple things to alleviate that. We contacted them, I don't recall how many times, but we did contact them multiple times.
3 times.
Okay, so yeah, we used 3 times with a couple postcard reminders. If you're familiar with the Dillman method, what that is we followed the Dillman method up to the certified mail stage, where we chose not to continue on with the certified mail because that adds to the cost of the survey very greatly, and it doesn't really increase your response rate significantly.
Basically what we did, Chris, was we sent out a cover letter in the survey to representative samples of current and lapsed subscribers. We followed up with a postcard reminding them and telling them how important it was that they fill out the survey. And then for those who did not respond, we sent out a second cover letter and survey. So 3 contacts from us. And the response rate we had was 58% for current subscribers and 25% for lapsed.
Wow.
Yeah.
Julie? How many people responded just on the first one? In other words, what was the difference between effort number 1 that you sent out and effort number 2?
Well, effort number 1 was more, we had more respondents.
If I'm recalling the stratification correctly, before we did this, we took a look at the lapsed subscribership. We knew that we would have a lower response rate from them because it's not as salient to them anymore. And so we sent out a larger raw number to lapsed subscribers than we did current subscribers. And so when we get those numbers back, I don't recall exactly what the sample size is on this data. It's been quite a while since I looked at this data.
It was 1,400 current subscribers and 1,800 lapsed subscribers.
That's how many returned the survey?
No, that's our original sample.
Okay. So with those response rates, what you're looking at is anytime I show you a percentage like this, it's going to be off plus or minus 4%. That's your margin of error. So when you look at 10 and 11%, like this group right here, you may say that there's a difference there. Statistically, there is no difference because that's well within the margin of error. However, you can unequivocally say between the satellite bulls and the non-consumptives, because those numbers exceed the margin of error, you can say that those two differ significantly.
And Dinah, I think, oh, go ahead, Chris.
This is Chris Madsen again. Did you stratify the sample any further than just lapsed and current?
I'm trying to recall. We pulled a sample that was stratified according to, let's see, I think we pulled one that was stratified according to age and location in the state. But we realized for our purposes, selecting a truly random sample would be more beneficial and help us accomplish our research questions better than stratifying it out by rural, urban, or age, for example. What you're looking at is data that's severely underrepresented by females. However, when you look at the subscribership, the percentage of males to females is very equal to what you're seeing here within this data.
And to get back to Dinah's question about response to the first survey as opposed to the second survey, my rough estimate is that we got 2/3 of our responses from the first effort and 1/3 from the second survey, basically the third contact people had had from us.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, okay. I guess I didn't catch what you were asking there. But in surveys in general, you kind of expect the 60-30-10 split, and what we saw was pretty similar to that.
Okay, good.
This is Don Winslow again. In the average age of a subscriber was what age?
62.
And the average age of a hunter in Arizona is?
Ooh.
I'm not sure if I have that information.
I wonder if the Game and Fish Department does have that information
It does.
somewhere. Don used to work for us, Lauren.
Yeah, it does. Help me understand what you're driving at and what you are hoping to show.
What I'm thinking is that there's a correlation there between the age of a hunter and the age of a subscriber. Therefore, you can take a look at what's happening to your hunting population by ages and see people who are tending to be older who are now doing this.
Okay.
So I would expect to see that number of the age number to go up also in the in people who subscribe.
Hmm.
And then I think we need to look at ways to reverse that. Because your average age in Arizona is about 32, 35, somewhere in there.
Yeah, I think it was 32 last time I looked.
Right.
Interesting.
So I would be looking at strategies to try to lower that age.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah, go ahead. This is Julie. We do want to make, we wrote up a report that's about 18 pages long of our analysis of the data and our responses to it. It doesn't include what we plan to do from here because we haven't set out and confirmed a list of actions that we plan to take based on this information. But it basically does go through the data and our responses. And I'd like to make that report available to anyone who's interested. And I wondered if you all have access to Dropbox or you send it any of those file sharing websites, or are you blocked from them on your work computer?
This is Natasha. We can use those.
Good.
Yep.
We have to get them open. So we're blocked unless we get a special dispensation to leave them open for a little while.
Okay, well, I think maybe I'll do it both ways. I'll make it available on Dropbox and send everybody an invitation, and then if that's going to be a problem for you, just shoot me an email and I'm happy to reply and attach the file.
Sounds good.
Okay. Well, it sounds like we're exhausted of questions, so I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you for coming today. We really appreciate your attendance. I hope it was helpful to you and your states, and as you're looking at directions you're taking in your magazine, or might have spurred a couple different ideas. But with that, I'll go ahead and sign off. Thank you for attending, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.